Wow, look at that one. It's so shiny.
You have expensive taste, don't you, buddy?
That piece is way out of your league, the tycoon chuckled, jabbing a finger toward the grimy kid. The staff snickered, unaware that the boy's lineage would soon wipe that smirk right off the rich man's face and replace it with pure terror. Imperial Diamond Jewelry wasn't just a store, it was a sanctuary for the elite, displaying timepieces with price tags that could buy a comfortable family home. Polished marble floors gleamed under the chandeliers, creating a mirror-like finish, while the staff possessed a radar for wealth trained to appraise a customer's net worth by a mere glance at their footwear. It started as a typical afternoon. Rodrigo Montemayor, a locale industrial titan, was inspecting a wrist piece that cost a king's ransom. A man who never heard the word no, he wore a bespoke suit worth more than what most people earned in a year. He carried himself with an air of superiority, treating everyone else as if they were mere background noise. 3 sales associates hovered around him like moths to a flame, their every nod and flatter scripted to stroke the ego of their high-roller guest. "You won't find another like this, Mr. Montemayor," purred Valentin Carrera, the manager, dripping with obsequiousness. "There are only 3 in North America." Rodrigo ignored the man entirely. His gaze remained locked on the dial, not admiring the craftsmanship, but assessing the dominance it projected. Then, the glass door pushed open, shifting the room's energy instantly. A boy stepped inside, but he clearly didn't belong. Grease and grime stained his clothes, and his sneakers were so worn the soles were practically gone, tracking faint smudges across the pristine tiles. His hair was a mess, and his hands were calloused, rough hands that spoke of hard labor far beyond his tender years. An icy silence descended upon the showroom. The staff traded repulsed glances. Marlene Figueroa, a sales associate, wrinkled her nose as if someone had just opened a sewer grate nearby. The kid moved deliberately, his wide eyes scanning the glass cases with equal parts wonder and resolve. He ignored the daggers everyone was staring at him. The palpable disdain filling the room didn't seem to register. He planted his feet in front of a particular display where a watch sat basking under precision lighting. It wasn't the priciest item in the inventory, but it caught the light with a unique allure. "Can I help you?" Marlene's voice sliced through the quiet, dripping with patronizing sweetness. The boy looked up, his gaze holding a maturity that didn't fit his youthful features. "I'd like to see that watch, please," he said, pointing a finger stained with motor oil at the glass. A booming laugh erupted from Rodrigo Montemayor, echoing off the walls. It was a harsh, mocking sound meant to belittle. "Did you guys hear that?" He wheezed, spinning around to face the staff like he was sharing a private joke. "The street urchin wants to inspect a timepiece." Valentin Carrera managed a tight, nervous smile caught in a bind between basic customer service and sucking up to his VIP. "Listen, kid, I think you're lost," he said, feigning politeness. "There's a toy shop about 3 blocks down." "I'm not looking for toys." The boy's voice didn't waver. "I'm looking for that watch." Rodrigo loomed over him. His massive frame cast a long shadow over the child. He leaned in, adopting the tone one uses with a slow-witted pet. "Look, son, that item costs more than your entire family will earn in a lifetime. Get it? This establishment is for significant people, people with actual capital, not for—" He paused, raking his eyes over the boy's dirty clothes with open disgust. "People like you." The boy stood his ground, his eyes, sharp and resolute, locked onto the tycoon's. "I just want to look," he insisted. "I'm not going to steal it." "Steal." Rodrigo barked out another laugh. "Kid, you'd have to work for 100 years to afford the strap alone. What are you going to pay with? Spare change you scraped off the sidewalk?" The staff chuckled, awkward and forced, but they played along. Marlene stepped up. "I think it's time for you to leave, sweetie. You're disturbing our VIPs. Let me see the watch." The boy said it a third time, his tone carrying a weight that sent a sudden, inexplicable shiver down Valentin's spine. Rodrigo snapped. He straightened up, his face flushing with annoyance. "You know what? I'm gonna teach you a lesson about how the real world operates." He marched over to the display case the boy had targeted. With a sharp wave of his hand, he commanded Valentin to unlock it. The manager obeyed, confused, but too afraid to object. Rodrigo lifted the timepiece with manicured hands that had never seen a day of hard labor. He dangled it in front of the kid, letting the diamonds catch the light. "See this?" His voice dripped with venom, masked as wisdom. "This is art. Perfection. Generations of master craftsmen worked to create something worthy of success." He thrust the watch right in the boy's face, mere inches from his nose. Pieces like this belong to men of my caliber, builders of dynasties' souls bred for refinement. He snatched the timepiece back. You, on the other hand, you exist to scrub the marble I walk on. Your destiny is to polish the luxury sedans I drive. Are we clear on your station in life? The boy didn't make a sound, though his knuckles whitened at his sides. This isn't for you. Rodrigo dragged out the syllables, relishing the cruelty. It never will be. Make peace with that now, and maybe your pathetic existence will be bearable. He tossed the watch back to Valentine with a sneer. Remove the trash. He's tainting the atmosphere. Marlene stepped forward to usher the kid out, but before her hand could graze his shoulder, a small voice cut through the tension. My grandfather told me about that piece. The sentence hung heavy in the showroom air. Rodrigo smirked, arching a brow. Your grandfather, please. Does he fix knockoffs at the flea market for spare change? No. The boy shook his head firmly. My grandfather created that watch. The room went dead silent, a thick, suffocating kind of quiet. You could feel the gravity of the moment pressing down. Valentine's face drained of color. Excuse me, what did you just say? The clerk's voice was barely a whisper. The boy answered, My grandfather was Aurelio Contreras. He spoke with absolute clarity. He designed it. He built it with his own hands. The name struck the room like a thunderclap. Valentine nearly fumbled the artifact. His hands shook as he stared down at the mechanism, seeing it with new eyes. Aurelio Contreras, he stammered. The Grandmaster, the legend himself. Rodrigo frowned, sensing the ground shifting beneath him. What is this nonsense? Who is he? Marlene, pale as a ghost, answered with a quiver in her voice. Aurelio Contreras was the greatest horologist in our nation's history. His work is beyond price. The world's wealthiest collectors would bankrupt themselves for a single original. He passed away recently, Valentine added, looking at the boy with a cocktail of awe and deep shame. Rumor had it his final masterpieces vanished into thin air. The boy gave a slow, solemn nod. My grandfather is gone, but before the end, he told me about his life's work. He said they were stolen, taken by vultures who preyed on him when he was too sick to fight back. His gaze locked onto the watch and Valentine's grip. That's one of them. Rodrigo felt a foreign sensation creeping into his gut. Doubt. Impossible? He scoffed, but the bite was gone from his bark. This item has papers. It was a legal acquisition. My grandfather never sold his final collection. The boy cut in sharply. Never. They were my inheritance. Valentine turned the watch over, his fingers trembling. On the case back, etched with the impossible precision of a master, sat a tiny 8-pointed star. The Contreras mark, he whispered. It's real. My God, it's actually real. The boy stepped forward and the room parted for him. Grandpa said I'd know what to do when I found them. He warned me about people who think wealth is a permit to take whatever they want. People who mistake poverty for weakness. He stared right into Rodrigo's soul, his young eyes burning with a resolve the millionaire had never encountered. He told me one last thing. What? Rodrigo choked out the word. He said when I found the thieves I should teach them a lesson that would scar their memory forever. Rodrigo's pulse hammered. The situation had spiraled. Who exactly are you, kid? He asked, and for the first time terror laced his tone. The boy just smiled. It was a melancholic smile, heavy with grief, yet sharp with purpose. I'm Mateo Contreras, and I'm here to take back what belongs to my family. The boutique door chimed again. Rodrigo froze as he looked toward the entrance, his blood turning to ice. Walking in with a stride that commanded the room was a figure he knew intimately, someone who had no business being here, someone who changed the entire equation. She moved with the silent authority of a woman who never has to introduce herself. Graciela Montemayor, his wife. Her presence was a shock, but it was her companion that truly stunned him. Trailing her slow but steady was an elderly woman. Her face was a map of hardship etched with deep lines of sacrifice. Her hands, gnarled from a lifetime of labor, clutched a small, carved wooden box. Rodrigo felt the floor tilt. Graciela, what are you doing here? His voice cracked, pitchy and desperate. She didn't answer right away, scanning the room instead. She took it all in, the scruffy boy, the terrified staff, the watch trembling in Valentine's hand. Finally, her gaze settled on her husband, wearing a look he had never seen before. It was a letdown, a complete and utter betrayal of expectations. I didn't just show up for the scenery, Graciela said, her tone sub-zero. I got a phone call, the kind that pulls the wool from your eyes. What is this nonsense? Rodrigo smoothed his suit jacket, desperate to look unbothered. This street kid barged in here screaming wild stories about a timepiece. He claims it's stolen property, but he's a liar. He speaks the truth." The correction came from the doorway spoken by the elderly woman. She didn't shout, but her voice carried the heavy, quiet pressure of a storm front moving in. Mateo didn't hesitate. He bolted to her side. "Grandma." The woman, Esperanza, wrapped the boy in a hug so gentle it felt like an act of rebellion against the room's hostility. She pressed a kiss to his grimy forehead and smoothed his tangled hair, treating him like he was made of spun glass. "Did you find it, baby?" she whispered. "I never doubted you." Rodrigo watched them, sweat starting to bead on his upper lip. "Who is she?" he barked. "What exactly is going on?" Graciela took a sharp step toward him, and he flinched back like a guilty dog. "Meet Esperanza Contreras Rodrigo. She's the widow of Aurelio Contreras and the grandmother of the child you've been treating like trash." The air left the room. The silence wasn't just quiet, it was suffocating. Esperanza gently let go of the boy and moved to the center of the showroom. She walked slow, carrying the heavy burden of a lifetime of unfairness in every step. "My husband spent his entire life making beautiful things." She began, her voice steady and proud. "He didn't just assemble gears, he poured his spirit into every single watch. It wasn't about the paycheck. He believed real art could lift people up." She stopped right in front of Rodrigo, locking eyes with him. "When Aurelio got sick, the medical bills swallowed us whole. The house went first, then my jewelry. We sold every scrap we owned to survive except those watches. They were holy to us, Mateo's birthright." Her composure cracked for a second, but she pulled it back together. "One night, men broke into our little apartment. Aurelio was bedridden, too weak to lift a hand. I was out at the pharmacy trying to get his pills. By the time I got back, the collection was gone. Every last piece." Mateo gripped his grandmother's hand, fighting back tears. "Grandpa died a few days later," the boy said, his voice shaking, "but he made me swear to find them. He said he couldn't rest in peace while they were still out there." Valentin, the store manager, looked like he was going to pass out. All the blood had drained from his face. "Mrs. Contreras?" he stammered. We didn't know. The paperwork looked real. The supplier swore it was all above board." "Which supplier?" Esperanza asked, her voice deadly quiet. Valentin gulped, darting his eyes from Rodrigo to Graciela before staring at his shoes. It was Mr. Montemayor. He set up the deal." The room froze. Graciela turned to her husband with terrifying slowness. "Rodrigo, tell me he's lying." The millionaire snapped. "This incompetent clerk is just trying to pin his screw-up on me. He's not lying." A new voice cut in. It was Marlene, the salesgirl who had been sneering at the kid just minutes ago. She looked ashamed but resolute. "I was there when Mr. Montemayor brought the guy in. I remember him saying he got the pieces from an artisan who didn't need them anymore. Said it was a once-in-a-lifetime steal." "Shut your mouth!" Rodrigo roared. "You're done. You're all fired. You don't have the authority to fire anyone." Graciela's tone was ice. "This is my store. My name is on the deed. It came from my father's estate, not yours." Rodrigo went white. "Graciela, baby, let's talk about this in the back office. I can explain." "Explain," she cut him off. "Explain how you ripped off a dying man, how you left a widow and a child to starve, how you trafficked stolen goods through my business." He fished for an excuse, a lie, anything to save his skin, but he came up empty. Esperanza unlatched the small wooden box she was carrying. It was filled with yellowed papers, faded photos, and a beat-up notebook. "This is my husband's ledger," she said. "Every piece he ever made is recorded in here. Unique serial numbers, specs, photos, it's all here." She pulled out a snapshot and held it up against the watch, trembling in Valentin's hands. A perfect match, down to the last scratch. "Number 847. Esperanza read from the log. Created for our grandson Mateo's birthday. Aurelio spent a full year on this one. Hand-polished every gear, every spring, every screw was placed with love. Tears finally spilled over her cheeks, but she didn't waver. This wasn't merchandise. It was a gift, a legacy from a grandfather to his boy. And you stole it from him." Mateo buried his face in his grandmother's coat, holding on tight. The boy's small frame was shivering, overwhelmed by emotions too heavy for a child to carry. "Don't cry, abuela," he murmured. "Grandpa always said we had to be tough. He said the truth always finds a way out." Graciela stared at her husband, but the man standing there felt like a complete stranger. She'd given this man the best years of her life, believing in his integrity, only to find out he was nothing more than a predator feeding on the helpless. "How many others?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Excuse me?" Rodrigo feigned ignorance, but she pressed on. How many watches did you steal? How many families did you ruin? His silence screamed the answer. Graciela squeezed her eyes shut, letting the sheer weight of his deceit wash over her. When she opened them, her resolve was set. Valentine, get the manager. I want that timepiece back in its owner's hands, immediately. The manager didn't waste a second. With trembling hands, he walked over to Matteo and dropped to one knee. Kid, His voice cracked under the pressure. There are no words for how I treated you, for how all of us treated you. I judged you by your clothes, and that was inexcusable. He handed over the watch with delicate care as if he were passing a holy relic. This was always yours. Whatever I can do to make this right, consider it done. Matteo cradled the watch in his palms, turning it over slowly to catch the light, memorizing every scratch and curve. Then came the break. The boy started to sob, not from sadness, but from relief, feeling a love that reached out from beyond the grave. Abuelo, he whispered, pressing the cold metal against his heart. I found it, just like I promised. Esperanza knelt beside her grandson, wrapping him in her arms as their tears mingled. It was a raw, holy moment that made everyone else in the room feel like they were trespassing on sacred ground. Even the staff, the same people who had sneered at the dirty kid minutes ago, were wiping their eyes. Rodrigo Montemayor, however, remained dry-eyed. His panic had hardened into rage. This isn't over, he hissed. I have attorneys. I have connections. You will not destroy my name with these baseless lies. Totally baseless. Graciela pulled out her phone. I made a few calls on my way over. Detective Ignacio Paredes rang a bell. He's the one who handled the art theft investigation. Turns out he never closed the file, just shelved it until he had proof. The blood left Rodrigo's face. I sent him the photos of Aurelio's ledger. He cross-referenced them with his stolen goods database. It's a match, Rodrigo. A perfect match. You can't do this, he stammered. The millionaire's voice was barely audible. I'm your husband. Graciela cut in. The man I married never actually existed. He was just a costume you wore to hide the monster underneath. Right on cue, the jewelry store entrance swung open. Two men walked in no uniforms, but they carried the unmistakable heavy air of law enforcement. Rodrigo Montemayor, the older one announced, his tone leaving no room for argument. The millionaire stepped back, instinct taking over. Who are you? Detective Ignacio Paredes. He flashed his badge. We need you to come down to the station. We have some questions regarding your acquisition of stolen property. You can't do this, Rodrigo bellowed. I have rights. I have a legal team. Your lawyers can meet us at the precinct, the detective replied with practiced calm. For now, Mr. Montemayor, I suggest you walk. As they steered him toward the exit, the millionaire twisted around for one last look. His eyes, burning with malice, locked onto Matteo. This is your fault, he spat. A filthy little street rat ruined my life. Matteo didn't flinch. With a wisdom far beyond his years, he replied, No, sir. You ruined your own life the moment you decided money mattered more than people. Rodrigo had nothing. No comeback could top that truth. When the doors finally closed behind him, the silence that filled the shop felt different. It was the quiet of a heavy weight lifting, the sound of justice finally settling in. Graciela walked over to Esperanza and clasped the older woman's rough hands in hers. Mrs. Contreras, I can't begin to express my shame. My husband, the man I thought I knew, he caused you unforgivable pain. Esperanza looked back with eyes that had seen too much hardship to be bitter and too much grace to be judgmental. You don't carry the burden of his sins, dear. It's what you do next that counts. I want to help, Graciela said, her voice steady. I'm going to track down every stolen watch. Every single piece goes back to its family. Matteo, still clutching his grandfather's legacy, looked up. You mean it? Graciela knelt so she was face to face with the boy. She gazed into eyes that had witnessed too much cruelty yet still held a spark of light. I mean every word, kid. And I promise you one more thing. What's that? I'm going to make sure you never walk into a room and feel like you're not good enough to be there. Because you, Matteo Contreras, belong anywhere you damn well please. Matteo managed a weak smile. It was small and guarded the expression of a kid who learned early not to trust good luck, but it was there. Neither of them realized this was just the prologue. There were more missing timepieces out there, more skeletons in the closet, and a harsh truth about Aurelio Contreras' death that would shatter their version of reality. The Contreras home was a tight squeeze tucked into a neighborhood where the asphalt gave up before reaching the driveways and ambitions felt too big for the cinder blocks holding them in. But to Mateo, it was the only sanctuary he had ever known. That night, with the adrenaline of the jewelry shop standoff still buzzing in his veins, sleep was impossible. Perched on the edge of his mattress, he held his grandfather's watch up to the candlelight, tilting it to watch the gears mesh in perfect rhythmic harmony. It felt as if Aurelio's heart was still beating inside that brass casing, too wired to sleep. The voice drifted from the doorway as Esperanza shuffled in, balancing 2 steaming mugs. She sank down next to her grandson and handed him a hot chocolate, wearing a weary grin. Your grandfather always swore this was the cure for a heavy mind. Mateo wrapped his hands around the ceramic, letting the warmth soak into his palms. Abuela, what was Mr. Montemayor's problem with Grandpa? Why the hate? Esperanza let out a long, heavy breath. She had been dreading that question. It wasn't always hot, amigo. Once upon a time, they were partners. Mateo's grip on the mug slipped. Partner's grandpa worked with that guy. Decades ago, before you were even a thought. Esperanza stared out the window, lost in the ghost of a memory. Aurelio was young then, a genius with his hands. Rodrigo was a hungry businessman who saw a gold mine in your grandfather's talent. He pitched a deal. Aurelio would build the watches. Rodrigo would sell them to the high rollers. And what happened, it worked like a charm at first. Your grandfather made a decent living, sure, but Rodrigo, he was keeping the lion's share of the profit. Aurelio didn't mind the money. He cared about the craft. He just wanted his art in the hands of people who actually understood it. Esperanza paused to take a sip. But then the blinders came off. Your grandfather found out something ugly. Mateo leaned in completely hooked. Rodrigo wasn't just selling timepieces. He was washing dirty money. He'd buy your grandfather's work for pennies on the book, sell them at an insane markup, and use the spread to clean cash from his other shady ventures. So Grandpa turned him in. He tried. Her tone turned bitter. He took the books to the authorities, but Rodrigo had the whole system in his pocket. Judges, cops, politicians. The report vanished into thin air, and instead of justice, your grandfather got threats. Mateo's hands started to shake. They threatened him. Explicitly. They said if he spoke up again, they'd come for us. Me, your mother, you even though you weren't born yet. Esperanza squeezed her grandson's hands. He did the only thing a father could do to keep us safe. He walked away, stopped selling to the public completely. He worked in the shadows building masterpieces he meant to leave for you. But they came for them anyway. Yeah. Esperanza closed her eyes, pained. When Aurelio got sick, Rodrigo knew the old man couldn't fight back. He sent his goons to strip the house. He knew that collection was worth millions and that your grandfather never told a soul where he hid them. So, how did they find the stash? The silence stretched. When she finally answered, it was barely a whisper. We were sold out, Mateo. Someone in our inner circle tipped Rodrigo off. The boy felt his stomach drop. Who? I don't know. He died before he could give me a name, but right at the end he said something strange. He said the wolf eats at our table. A chill ran down Mateo's spine. It meant the snake was someone they trusted, someone they broke bread with. Abuela, how many did they take? 12. His final dozen, the magnum opus. Each one more intricate than the last, and so far we've only clawed one back. Esperanza brushed a hand against his cheek. But you've got fire, little one. You're braver than your grandfather and I ever were. You brought the first one home. You'll find the rest? Mateo stared at the watch with a hardened resolve. Count on it, Abuela. I won't stop. Neither of them noticed the silhouette watching them from the dark street outside. The next morning, Graciela Montemayor pulled up to the Contreras curb in a nondescript sedan. She looked wrecked. She had pulled an all-nighter shredding through financial records and making calls, trying to wrap her head around the sheer scale of her husband's rot. Esperanza opened the door, polite but guarded. A lifetime of getting burned had taught her not to hand over the matches. Mrs. Montemayor, you're here early? Just Graciela, please. She stepped inside, her jaw set tight. I was up all night digging through files. I found something. You need to see this. Mateo emerged from the back room, the grandfather's timepiece heavy against his chest on its chain. He wasn't letting that thing out of his sight again. Graciela pulled a heavy binder from her designer bag. My husband documented every single transaction. He thought he was being clever, but really he just wrote his own confession. She flipped the file open on the worn table. Photos, receipts, and contracts spilled out. The 12 stolen watches are all listed here. She tapped a spreadsheet. Rodrigo scattered them among different clients. A few ended up in local private vaults. The rest were shipped overseas. Esperanza's hands shook as she touched the papers. Do you know where they are? I've tracked down 9 of them. The other 3, Graciela paused. Those three went to an anonymous buyer, cash only. No paper trail on who he is or where he took them. Mateo scanned the columns intently until his eyes locked onto a specific entry. This one? He pointed to a grainy photo labeled number 851. Grandpa talked about it, said it mattered more than the rest. Why? Graciela asked. Because it wasn't just a timepiece. Mateo could still hear the old man's voice clearly in his head. There's a hidden compartment inside. Grandpa hid something in there, said it was a game changer. The women exchanged a glance. Do you know what it is? Esperanza asked, shocked her grandson held secrets she didn't. Not exactly. He just said once I found that watch I'd understand why he ran away. Why we had to live in hiding. Graciela started shuffling through her papers with frantic energy. Number 851. It's one of the three sold to the mystery buyer. I don't know where it is, but I know how we can track it. A gravelly voice cut in from the doorway. They all spun around. An older man stood framed in the entrance. His face was a map of hard-living scars intersecting with deep lines, and his eyes held the weight of too many bad memories. Esperanza's face lost all color. Domingo. The man gave a slow nod. Hello, Esperanza. It's been a while. Who's this guy? Mateo stepped between the stranger and his grandmother, shoulders squared. He was your grandfather's best friend, Esperanza said. Her voice wavered. You vanished, Domingo. After the robbery you were just gone. Domingo Herrera looked down at his boots, ashamed. I had to run. I knew who sold Aurelio out. The air in the room instantly grew heavy. You know who it was? Graciela asked. Why stay silent? Fear, Domingo admitted quietly. The traitor came for me. Said if I talked, I'd end up just like Aurelio. Mateo stepped forward, confused. Just like my grandfather, he died sick. Domingo looked at the kid, his expression pained. He was sick, son, but he was recovering. Doctors said he was going to make it. I don't understand, Esperanza whispered. The night before he died, Aurelio called me. Domingo fished a battered flip phone from his pocket. He left a voicemail. I've sat on it all this time, too terrified to act. His hands shook as he hit play. Aurelio Contreras' voice filled the small room, weak and raspy but unmistakable. Domingo, brother, I know who rat on us. I know who told Rodrigo where to find the collection. And I know something else, something I can't say over the line. It's inside number 851. The proof is inside. If I don't make it through the night, make sure Mateo gets that watch. He'll know what to do. He's tougher than the rest of us put together. Look after my family, Domingo, and forgive me for dragging you into this. The recording clicked off. Esperanza wept silently at the sound of her husband's voice. Mateo stood there, fists clenched white, trying to keep it together. He knew, Mateo said, his voice cracking. He knew they were coming for him. Someone actually... He couldn't finish. Graciela stepped closer and placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. Mateo, look at me. We have to find that watch. Not just for the legacy, but to put the people responsible behind bars. We're flying blind, though, Domingo cut in. We never ID'd the buyer. There is one person who knows. Graciela spoke the words slowly, like they tasted like poison. My husband. Rodrigo knows exactly who bought those 3 pieces. He's the only one, but he's in a cell, Esperanza noted. How do we get him to talk? Graciela checked her phone. Rodrigo called me from the precinct last night. He wants to cut a deal. Claims he has intel to trade for a lighter sentence. And you're gonna help him? Mateo asked, staring at her in disbelief. After everything he did to us. I'm not helping him, Graciela replied, her voice cold as ice. I intend to weaponize his desperation. Rodrigo has no idea I know just how deep the rot goes. He still thinks I'm his puppet. We'll let him keep that delusion. Esperanza stared at Graciela, seeing a stranger where a socialite once stood. She had misjudged her completely. So, what's your play? I'll pay him a visit, play the devoted wife. I'll promise to save his skin, but only if he gives up the location of the 3 missing timepieces. That's playing with fire, Domingo warned. Rodrigo is sharp. If he catches a whiff of a setup, he won't suspect a thing. Graciela's lips curled into a smile void of any actual warmth. After all these years, he's convinced I'm just a fragile socialite desperate to keep up appearances. He'll swallow every lie I feed him. Mateo stepped closer to the wealthy woman, locking eyes with her. He was scanning for something real, truth, sincerity, a bond. Why are you helping us? He asked. My grandfather was your enemy. People like us, we're nothing to you. Graciela knelt, lowering herself to eye level with the boy. Your grandfather wasn't my enemy, Mateo. My husband was the one who declared war on him. I was blind to all of this until yesterday. Now that my eyes are open, I can't live with the guilt of inaction." She paused, mist gathering in her eyes. "Besides, I have a daughter away at college. When she learns what her father is capable of, her entire world is going to shatter. The least I can do is ensure that when the time comes, I can look her in the eye and say I tried to fix the broken pieces." Mateo offered a slow, solemn nod. "Okay, I trust you. Thank you, little one. I won't let you down." As Graciela steeled herself for the trip to the precinct, Domingo leaned in close to Esperanza. "There's something else," he whispered. "Something I couldn't say in front of the boy. What is it, the traitor? The person who sold out Aurelio is closer than you think." Esperanza felt the ground drop out from under her. "Who is it, Domingo? Tell me." But before he could answer, the violent crash of shattering glass echoed through the house. A brick had come flying through the window, a note lashed to it. Mateo snatched it up before the adults could intervene. His eyes darted across the words scrawled in a shaky, frantic hand. "Stop looking for the swatches or the boy ends up like his grandfather." The paper slipped from Mateo's trembling fingers. In that moment, the gravity of the situation sank in. This wasn't just a scavenger hunt for stolen timepieces. They were up against a force willing to burn everything down to keep its secrets buried. The municipal detention center loomed ahead, a fortress of concrete and misery. Its gray walls seemed to devour any shred of hope that dared get close. The air inside reeked of cheap bleach and broken dreams. Graciela Montemayor walked down the visitor's corridor, spine stiff but heart racing. She had rehearsed every syllable, every gesture, every twitch of her face. She needed Rodrigo to see the submissive wife he had always known, not the woman she was becoming. The guard led her to a booth divided by thick plexiglass. On the other side, Rodrigo waited, his anxiety poorly masked. The transformation was jarring. The man who days ago strutted through the jewelry store in Italian wool now wore the drab gray of the inmate population. His eyes, usually burning with arrogance, held a look Graciela had never witnessed in him. True vulnerability. "Graciela," his voice shook with relief. "I knew you would come. I knew you wouldn't leave me to rot." She sat with practiced calm. "Rodrigo, we need to talk." "Yes, of course, anything." He leaned toward the glass, desperate. "This is all a terrible misunderstanding. That boy and his grandmother are lying through their teeth. The watches were legitimate acquisitions. My lawyers can prove it." "Your documents are forgeries, Rodrigo." The silence that followed screamed louder than any confession. What are you saying? I checked everything. Every ledger, every contract, every transaction. I know exactly what you did. You stole those watches from a dying old man. You laundered them through my store." Rodrigo swallowed hard, his mask of innocence cracking. "Graciela, let me explain. I'm not here to listen to excuses." She cut him off with the calculated ice in her voice. "I am here because despite everything you've done, I want to help you." Hope flooded back into Rodrigo's eyes like a drowning man spotting a lifeboat. "Do you mean it? I knew you'd understand. But I need something in return." He paused, eyes narrowing with sudden suspicion. "What do you need?" "Details on the 3 watches you sold to the anonymous buyer." Rodrigo's face hardened instantly. "I don't know what you're talking about. Please don't insult my intelligence. You sold 9 watches to known collectors, but 3 went to someone who paid cash and left no paper trail. I need to know who that buyer was." "Why do you want to know?" Graciela leaned in closer, dropping her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Look, if I get those timepieces back to the Contreras estate, I can convince them to drop the suit. No victims means the prosecution's case falls apart. Without the physical proof, the DA has nothing. You'd be walking out of these gates in no time." Of course she was lying through her teeth. She wasn't about to help this man dodge a prison sentence, but for the con to work, she needed to sell it. Rodrigo sat back, his eyes drilling into hers, looking for a crack in the facade. After 30 years of hustling people, he considered himself a human lie detector. He just never expected his own wife to be the one capable of playing him this well. "Fine," he finally grunted. "I'll give you a name, but this is a two-way street. I need a favor first." "Name it." "My attorney, Gallardo. He's sitting on a stack of files in his downtown office. If the feds get their hands on that paperwork, I'm buried. I need you to make those files disappear. Permanently." She nodded, already planning to hand everything over to the authorities. Those papers were probably the smoking gun. "Consider it handled. Now the buyer. Who paid for the stolen goods?" Rodrigo glanced at the guards, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Our mystery patron wasn't some random collector. It was someone from the inner circle, someone who knew old man Aurelio intimately. Her pulse spiked. Who? His own flesh and blood. The revelation hit her like a punch to the gut. Family, Aurelio only has his widow and the grandson left. You're lying. A cruel, twisted smirk spread across Rodrigo's face. There's another player on the board, one everyone buried years ago. What are you talking about? The boy's mother, Renata Contreras, the prodigal daughter. The room seemed to spin. That's impossible. Mateo is an orphan. His parents died in a car wreck. The father's sure he's dead and buried. But Renata, she's very much alive, and she's the one who sold out the old man's hiding spot. Graciella's mind raced, trying to fit the pieces together. Why would she do that to her own father? Because she hated the old bastard? Rodrigo licked his lips, clearly enjoying the shock on his wife's face. Aurelio worshipped his work. He spent more time polishing gears than raising his kid. By the time Renata was an adult, that neglect had turned into pure, unadulterated poison. So, when she found herself strapped for cash, she came knocking on my door. And you paid her to betray him, generously. Enough to fake her death vanish into the wind and start over while her family mourned. Graciella felt sick to her stomach. Where is she? Ah, that little nugget stays with me until you hold up your end of the bargain. He stood up, signaling their time was up. Burn the files at Gallardo's office. Once I know their ashes, I'll give you Renata's location. She's the key to the collection. The guard stepped forward to drag him back to his cell. Before the heavy door slammed shut, Rodrigo glanced back over his shoulder. Graciella, don't even think about crossing me. I've got eyes on the outside. If you play games, I'll know. And trust me, these bars won't stop me from ruining you. Graciella sat frozen in the sterile visitation room long after he was gone. Mateo's mother was alive, and she was the snake in the grass. Across town at the Contreras estate, Mateo couldn't stop staring at his grandfather's masterpiece. Domingo sat across from him, his weathered face a mask of guilt and resolve. The brick thrown through the window had shaken them up, but Domingo had a heavier burden to unload before the clock ran out. Mateo! Domingo started, his voice rough. I've got skeletons in my closet. Things I should have told you years ago. The boy looked up, eyes wide. Like what? Domingo took a shaky breath. Your grandpa and I, we weren't just friends. We were blood brothers in everything but name. We came up together, learned the trade side by side. But see Aurelio, he was a genius. Me, I was just a mechanic. I could fix a watch, but he could make them sing. The silence that followed was heavy with regret. Then Rodrigo showed up, flashing his cash, talking about turning Aurelio's work into a gold mine. And God help me, I got jealous. For the first time, I hated Aurelio for being better than me. Mateo furrowed his brow. What does any of this have to do with what's happening now? Rodrigo saw it, Domingo admitted. He saw the green-eyed monster and he fed it. Offered me a stack of bills for intel on your grandfather. Wanted to know where the tools were kept. He wanted the trade secrets, the designs, the prototypes. Mateo felt a cold chill run down his spine. You sold him out, too. Not like that. Domingo raised his hands in defense. I never gave up the location of the master collection. I didn't even know where they were, but I gave Rodrigo enough ammo to lean on him, to squeeze him until he couldn't breathe. Tears welled up in the old man's eyes, spilling over into the deep wrinkles of his face. By the time I realized I was the bad guy in the story, the damage was done. Aurelio was sick, backed into a corner. I tried to warn him, but I was too slow. He already knew. He knew you were the leak. Yeah, and he still forgave me. Domingo's voice cracked under the weight of the memory. That voicemail I played for you when he said, "Forgive me for putting you in danger," he wasn't just talking about the present day. He was talking about the past. He forgave me years ago, knowing that his mercy would eventually put a target on my back with Rodrigo. Mateo tried to wrap his head around the betrayal and the redemption. Okay, but if you didn't tell him where the watches were, then who did? Only one other soul on this earth knew the truth besides your grandmother. Who? Before Domingo could get the name out, the door creaked open. Esperanza rushed in looking frantic, with Graciella right on her heels, pale as a ghost and clearly bearing a heavy burden. Mateo, Graciella's voice shook. I have to tell you something and it's going to hurt. The boy stood up, his stomach dropping like the floor was about to give way. What did you find out? Graciella glanced at Esperanza, desperate for a little courage. The one who sold out your grandfather? The one who leaked the location of the hidden watches? It was your mother. The room went dead silent. My, Mateo's voice barely squeaked out. My mom is dead. No, sweetheart. Graciela dropped to her knees to look him in the eye. According to Rodrigo, she staged the whole thing. She took the payout for the information and vanished. Esperanza let out a strangled sob and collapsed into the nearest chair, her legs giving out. That can't be right, she kept stammering. Renata wouldn't. Not to her own father, not to her own son. Mateo stood frozen, trembling from head to toe. My mom is alive. That's what Rodrigo says. And she just left me. No one had the guts to answer him. The boy stared down at the watch in his hands, a masterpiece his grandfather had built with such care, the last pure thing left of his family's legacy. Grandpa used to say the enemy eats at our own table, he whispered. He meant her, my own mother. Tears started streaming down his face, but he didn't look sad anymore. He looked fierce. I want to find her. What? Esperanza gasped, panicked. Mateo, absolutely not. I need to look her in the eye, the boy pressed on. I need to ask her why she left us, why she sold Grandpa out, why she let me mourn her crying myself to sleep every night wishing she'd come back. Domingo stood up slowly. Mateo, there's more. Everyone turned to look at the old man. Before he passed, your grandfather told me something, a secret only he and Renata shared. What is it? Watch number 851, the one with the hidden compartment. It doesn't just hold evidence against Rodrigo. It has proof against your mother, too. Graciela furrowed her brow. What kind of proof? Your grandfather kept receipts on everything. Recordings, photos, logs of every conversation between Renata and Rodrigo while they plotted the theft. He knew he'd need insurance one day to protect the family from the lies. That's why my mother doesn't want us finding that watch. Mateo put the pieces together. That's why she threatened us. Exactly. If that watch surfaces, it's not just Rodrigo going down. Your mother will face serious prison time for conspiracy and fraud. Esperanza buried her face in her hands. My own daughter. How could she do this to us? Greed changes people. Domingo spoke with a heavy heart. I saw it in myself when I took Rodrigo's bribe, and I saw it in Renata when she chose a paycheck over her own blood. Mateo walked over to the window, staring down at the street where the rock with the threat note had crashed through just hours ago. She's close, he murmured, watching us. She knows we're on to the truth, so we have to watch our backs. Graciela chimed in. Rodrigo mentioned a lawyer, Fermin Gallardo. Apparently he holds all the sensitive documents. If we get our hands on those files, we could track your mother down. But how do we get them? Graciela hesitated. Rodrigo ordered me to destroy them. He still thinks I'm on his payroll. I could go to the lawyer's office, act like I'm shredding them, and make copies instead. That's a dangerous game, Domingo noted. If Rodrigo finds out you crossed him... I don't care anymore, Graciela said, her voice steel. That man has ruined enough lives. It's time he paid the price. Just then, Esperanza's phone started buzzing. The room went quiet instantly. The old woman squinted at the screen, confused. Unknown number. Answer it, Mateo commanded. Put it on speaker. Her hands shaking, Esperanza tapped the screen. Hello. A woman's voice filled the room. It was a voice Esperanza knew in her bones even after years of silence. Hello, Mother. The phone nearly slipped from Esperanza's grip. Renata. I see you figured it out. Impressive. I didn't think you'd make it this far. Mateo stepped toward the phone, his heart pounding against his ribs. Mom. The line went dead for a second. Mateo, you've grown. You sound different. Why? The boy choked back a sob. Why did you leave us? Why did you betray Grandpa? Because your grandfather never gave me what I was owed. Renata's voice was ice-cold, completely void of guilt. I spent my entire childhood being ignored while he fawned over those precious watches of his. When I asked for my inheritance early, he cut me off, said the collection was for you, not me. They were for me because he loved me. Mateo shouted, He loved you. Love, please. Your grandfather loved his inventions. We were just in the way. Esperanza grabbed the phone. Renata, how can you say such a thing? Your father adored you. He slaved away day and night just to give you a good life. He slaved away for his clocks, Mother. I just wanted a dad who was actually there. I never got one. And so you destroyed him. So that explains why you faked your death. Why you walked out on your own son. The line went dead silent. Listen closely. Renata finally broke the quiet, her tone dropping into a low threat. Stop looking for the watches. Drop the investigation. Forget this ever happened and move on with your lives. Or what? Mateo challenged. Or you'll pay a steep price. I've already sent a warning. Don't make me follow through. I'm not scared of you. The boy's voice was rock steady. Grandfather taught me that the truth always finds a way out. I'm finding that watch no matter what you throw at me. Another pause. You're just like him. Renata murmured, stubborn, headstrong, blinded by your own principles. Thank you. That's the best compliment you could give me. Fine. Have it your way. Renata's voice hardened like steel. But remember this, son, you chose this path. Whatever happens next is on your head. The line clicked dead. The silence left behind was thick, heavy with emotions no one knew how to voice. Esperanza wept without a sound. Graciella's fists were white-knuckled with rage. Domingo stared at the floor, weighed down by shame. But Mateo wore a look no one expected. He was smiling. Mateo. Esperanza looked at him worried. Are you all right? She slipped up, Grandma. What do you mean? By calling, she confirmed everything. She's alive, she betrayed us, and most importantly, his eyes burned with resolve. She confirmed she's terrified. Terrified of what's inside that watch. Terrified we'll actually find it. Graciela caught on instantly. He's right. If the watch was worthless, she never would have risked reaching out. Exactly. Mateo nodded. We're going to find it. And when we do, my mother is going to face the truth she's running from. He turned to Graciela. Can you get those papers from Rodrigo's lawyer? First thing tomorrow morning. And you, Domingo, are you with us until the end? The old man looked up, a fresh fire in his eyes. I failed your grandfather once. It won't happen again. I'll do whatever it takes to honor his memory. Mateo looked around the room. His grandmother shattered but standing. Graciela transformed from a submissive wife into a fierce ally. Domingo seeking redemption for old sins. Then tomorrow it begins, he declared. Tomorrow we get the proof and my mother learns you can't outrun the truth forever. Outside, night had fully settled. Somewhere across the city, Renata Contreras stared at her phone, her face etched with worry. She had underestimated her boy. She wouldn't make that mistake twice. Dawn broke through a thick fog that draped the streets like a shroud of secrets. Graciela Montemayor slipped out of her house before the sun was fully up, heart racing with a kind of resolve she'd never known before. Attorney Fermin Gallardo's office was tucked away in an aging building downtown. It was the sort of place that whispered of backroom deals and buried truths. The gold lettering on the door read, Gallardo and Associates Attorneys at Law, though it might as well have said Keepers of Secrets. Graciela walked in head high. The receptionist, a young woman with a bored look, glanced up from her screen. Morning. Do you have an appointment? I'm Graciela Montemayor, Rodrigo Montemayor's wife. The name landed with the weight she intended. The girl paled slightly and grabbed the phone. Counselor Mrs. Montemayor is here. A pause. Yes, sir. She hung up and pointed down the hall. Third door on the left. He's expecting you. Fermin Gallardo was exactly as Graciela pictured, middle-aged calculating eyes and a smile that looked rehearsed. His office reeked of expensive leather and unchecked ambition. Mrs. Montemayor? He stood offering a handshake that lingered a beat too long. I'm terribly sorry about your husband's situation. A tragic injustice. Thank you for seeing me so early, counselor. Please call me Fermin. He gestured to the chair opposite his desk. Rodrigo called me last night. He mentioned you'd be coming for the files. A chill ran down Graciela's spine. Rodrigo was already 2 steps ahead. That's right. My husband is worried certain papers might fall into the wrong hands. I understand perfectly. Gallardo walked over to a metal filing cabinet in the corner. Your husband is a cautious man. Always kept copies of everything. Contracts, transactions, correspondence, the works. He slid a drawer open and pulled out a thick folder. Here is everything regarding the watch matter. Graciela took the folder, fighting to keep her hands steady. It felt heavier than it looked. Is this it? Everything hard copy? Yes. Gallardo gave her a look she couldn't quite read. But I have to warn you, Mrs. Montemayor. About what? Rodrigo gave me very specific instructions. He said if you came alone and acted suspiciously, I was to notify him immediately. Graciela's heart skipped a beat. And what exactly would trigger your radar? Gallardo offered a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Making copies of the files instead of shredding them, for instance. The silence that settled between them was heavy loaded with unsaid threats. Counselor, Graciela said, keeping her voice steady, do you have any idea what is actually in these papers? Naturally. I reviewed them myself. Then you know my husband stole priceless heirlooms from a dying man. You know he destroyed a family. You know he is likely mixed up in things much darker than theft. Gallardo didn't answer, but his mask slipped just a fraction. And yet you stand by him. I am his attorney. That is the job. No. Graciela leaned across the desk. Your job is to uphold the law, not help criminals skirt it. Mrs. Montemayor, let me ask you something, counselor. Do you have children? The question threw him off balance. I have a daughter. Why? Because right here in these documents is proof my husband conspired with a woman to rob her own father, to abandon her own son, a boy who grew up thinking his mother was in the grave, a child who cried himself to sleep for years, never knowing she had tossed him aside for a payout. Graciela watched the lawyer's eyes shift. She had found the crack in his professional armor. That boy is looking for justice now, she pressed. He wants the truth about his family, about his grandfather, about the mother who sold him out. These documents, they are the only way he gets that. Gallardo sat in silence for a long beat. What do you want from me? He finally asked. Let me walk out of here with these files, intact. I want you to keep this from Rodrigo, and just this once I want you to make the choice that lets you sleep at night. The lawyer looked at the folder, then at Graciela. Finally, his gaze drifted to the framed photo on his desk, a little girl with dark hair smiling. There is one more thing, he said, his voice dropping low. It is not in the files. Rodrigo told me himself. What is it? Renata. She didn't just betray her father. There are whispers she had a hand in his death. The room seemed to freeze. What are you saying? Aurelio Contreras was sick, yes, but according to Rodrigo, the night the old man died he had a visitor. Someone not on the hospital logs. Who was it? I can't say for sure, but Rodrigo implied Renata wanted to make certain her father couldn't talk, couldn't reveal who had stabbed him in the back. Graciela felt the floor lurch beneath her. Are you saying I am saying nothing. Gallardo cut her off. I'm only repeating what I heard. What you do with that is on you. He slid the folder across the desk. Go, Mrs. Montemayor, and never step foot in this office again. Graciela arrived at the Contreras estate, face drained of color, hands shaking. Mateo, Esperanza, and Domingo were waiting, tension radiating off them. Did you get them? Mateo asked before she was even through the door. Graciela dropped the folder on the table without a word. Her look terrified them. What is it? Esperanza stepped closer. It's fine. I got the papers. Graciela spoke slowly. But I found out something else. Something awful. The room went quiet. Rodrigo's lawyer told me about the night Aurelio died. The blood left Esperanza's face. What about it? Someone visited him at the hospital that night, a visitor who didn't sign in. That is impossible. Esperanza shook her head. I was with him until 10 o'clock. I went home to get some rest because the nurses swore he was stable. When I came back in the morning, he was already... Her voice cracked. What time did it happen? Domingo asked, his voice grave. The doctors said it was in the early hours. Esperanza answered through tears. His heart just stopped. They said it was natural that his body just couldn't take anymore. But what if it wasn't natural? Mateo's voice trembled. What if someone... He couldn't finish the thought. Graciela opened the folder and started sifting through the documents. Sales contracts for the watch's bank transfers, messages between Rodrigo and buyers. Here, she pointed to a sheet. It is a call log. Rodrigo kept everything, Mateo muttered, leaning in to read. These are calls between Rodrigo and your mother in the weeks before the theft. But look at this date. She tapped a specific line. This call was made the night your grandfather died, 3 in the morning. The silence in the room was suffocating. Why would Rodrigo call my mother at that hour? Mateo asked. Or why would she call him? Domingo added. Esperanza collapsed into a chair, devastated. My daughter. My own daughter. We don't know for sure yet. Graciela tried to steady her. But we need to find Renata. We need answers. Is there anything in there that says where she is? Mateo asked. Graciela flipped through the papers. Suddenly, she froze. This is interesting. What did you find? A lease agreement. Rodrigo rented a warehouse on the outskirts of the city a while back. This is the spot. Domingo checked the paper, his brow furrowing as he looked up. A storage unit. What does she need a place like this for? Stashing away things that don't fit the penthouse aesthetic. Graciela said, her voice dry. Like stolen heirlooms, for instance. Mateo snatched the slip of paper. We're going. Esperanza immediately shook her head. Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. If Renata's watching, yeah, it might be a trap. Or it's where she's hiding the 851. Mateo's eyes were intense, a watch with all the evidence. Kid's got a point, Domingo chimed in, his tone grave. If we want the truth, we have to start knocking on doors, even the rusty ones. Graciela nodded, pulling her keys. I'll handle it. You three stay put. No way. Mateo shot back, standing his ground. I'm coming with you. It's too risky, she argued, but he cut her off. Grandpa gave this job to me. I'm not sitting on the sidelines while you guys finish my mission. Esperanza opened her mouth to object, then stopped. She knew that steel in his eyes. It was Aurelio all over again, stubborn and unmovable. Then I'm going too, she announced, the declaration hanging in the air. Mom, you can't be serious. I can. She straightened her back, and I will. She stood tall, summoning a dignity that had been buried for years. That woman is my daughter. If anyone is going to face her down, it's going to be me. I owe Aurelio, Domingo added quietly, and I owe it to you folks to see this through. Graciela scanned the motley crew. A broken grandmother, a kid with too much courage, a man chasing redemption, and herself the scorned wife turned unlikely accomplice. It was a tragic little army. Fine. She relented, sighing. We all go, but the second things go sideways, Mateo falls back. Deal. Understood. The boy gave a stiff, reluctant nod. The storage unit sat in the gut of the industrial district, a graveyard of empty warehouses and cracked pavement. It was the kind of place where dirty secrets went to rot. Graciela's luxury sedan looked out of place, parked in front of the rusted corrugated metal. She checked the lease agreement. The numbers matched. This is it, she said. They piled out of the car, eyes darting around, the desolate lot, nerves on high alert. The silence was heavy, only broken by the wind whistling through the hollow shells of nearby buildings. Lock's busted, Domingo noted, pointing at the latch. Someone's been here. He gave the metal door a shove. It swung open with a screech that echoed like a gunshot in the empty space. Inside, shadows swallowed the walls, broken only by thin beams of sunlight stabbing through cracks in the ceiling. Piles of cardboard boxes and sheet-draped furniture cluttered the floor. The air smelled of mold and old memories. Spread out, Graciela whispered. Look for anything useful. She clicked on her phone's flashlight. The group split up, combing through the debris in separate corners. Mateo drifted towards the back wall. A workbench sat there, cluttered with specialized gear horology equipment. Over here, he called out. Check this out. As the others gathered, the flashlight beam revealed the tools of the trade loop's micro screwdrivers, precision tweezers. And right in the center, a wooden case bearing a distinct crest. The 8-pointed star, Mateo breathed. That's Aurelio Contreras' mark. That belongs to my grandfather. His hands shook as he lifted the lid, treating the wood like it was a holy relic. Inside lay 3 timepieces. The missing collection. We found them. Esperanza sobbed, her hand covering her mouth. Oh God, we actually found them. Mateo leaned in close, inspecting the craftsmanship. They were flawless mechanical poetry containing his grandfather's soul, but his focus zeroed in on the one with the specific engraving on the caseback. Number 851, Mateo said. This is it. He lifted the watch with the reverence of a priest handling a sacrament. The one with the blind compartment, Graciela noted. Do you know how to crack it? The boy fell silent, studying the bezel. His grandfather had schooled him on this hidden catches the silent triggers master horologists built into their masterpieces to guard their secrets. Pressure point is here, he murmured, his thumb finding a microscopic groove on the rim. Twist the crown. Now. A soft, satisfying click echoed. The caseback popped open, exposing a false bottom. Nestled inside sat a micro USB drive and a tightly folded piece of paper. Mateo pinched the note and pulled it out, his fingers trembling. He recognized the script instantly. My dearest Mateo, if you're reading this, you found the watch. It means you have the courage I always knew you possessed. This drive holds the truth. Audio logs files everything you need to piece together the betrayal that destroyed our family. But there is a darker truth I kept buried. Something I couldn't speak of to a soul, not even your grandmother. The night of the crash, the night your mother died, I was there. I saw it all happen. Your mother didn't die that night, Mateo. She walked away. She chose to leave, but she didn't leave alone. She left with a figure who has been lurking in the shadows for years. Someone far more dangerous than Rodrigo Montemayor ever was. The files on this drive explain everything. Once you know the truth, the choice will be yours to make. I love you, kid. I always have. and I trust you'll do what's right. Love, Grandpa Aurelio. Matteo lowered the paper tears cutting tracks through the dust on his face. There's someone else, he whispered. Someone Grandpa knew about but was too afraid to name. Who? Esperanza's voice cracked. I don't know yet, but the answer is on this. He held up the tiny drive. We need to plug this in. Now. Let's move, Graciela urged, scanning the shadows. We're sitting ducks here. They turned for the door but froze before taking a single step. A shadow loomed in the doorframe, cutting off the exit. The harsh backlight turned the figure into a void, hiding her features, but the second she spoke, the room went cold with recognition. Hello, Matteo. It's been a lifetime. It was Renata, all right, but she hadn't come alone. Another shape detached itself from the darkness behind her, a tall man with ice in his veins. Just seeing him made Domingo stumble back in sheer panic. No, the old watchmaker wheezed, shaking his head. That's impossible. You know him? Matteo asked, but the old man's throat had locked up tight. The blood had drained right out of Domingo's face. The man standing next to Renata was a ghost. Someone buried years ago, a resurrection that threatened to burn their whole world down. And that crooked grin on his face made one thing clear. Things were about to get ugly. The air in the warehouse suddenly felt too thick to breathe. Time hung suspended as their brains tried to reject what their eyes were seeing. The man beside Renata took a deliberate step forward, shedding the shadows. The overhead bulb illuminated a face weathered by the years yet unmistakably etched into the nightmares of everyone present. Impossible. Domingo kept backing away until his spine hit concrete. You're dead. I watched the car go over the cliff myself. I saw it burn. The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. Sometimes old friend the dead refused to stay put. Matteo's gaze darted between the stranger and his mother, trying to solve the puzzle. Who is he? He asked, his voice cracking. It was Esperanza who answered, her voice trembling with dread. That's Leandro Solis, Renata's husband. Your father, Matteo. The floor seemed to drop out from under the boy. My father... Renata let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Surprise, kid. Turns out neither of your parents actually died in that crash. Matteo felt his lungs seize up. He'd built his entire identity around being an orphan. He had spent countless nights sobbing into his pillow for parents he thought were tragic victims. Now he finds out they were breathing this whole time, and they had left him behind by choice. Why? The word clawed its way out of his throat, raw and broken. Why did you just leave me? Leandro sauntered toward the group, his boots echoing against the silence. Because you were baggage, kid. A mistake that never should have happened. Leandro. Renata chided him, though her heart wasn't in it. What truth hurts, doesn't it? We never wanted kids, but when your mother got knocked up, your grandfather guilt-tripped her into keeping it. He claimed a grandson would give him a new purpose, that we'd be one big happy family. His voice dripped with acid. But happy families are just fairy tales poor people tell themselves to get by. Esperanza lunged forward, vibrating with rage. How dare you? Aurelio loved this boy more than life itself. Definitely more than you two broken souls are capable of loving anyone. Aurelio was a sentimental hack, Leandro shot back. A genius with gears maybe, but an idiot with reality. He'd spend hundreds of hours building masterpieces while we were barely scraping by. That's a lie, Esperanza screamed. Aurelio gave you the world. He bought your house, paid off your debts, bailed you out every single time. Crumbs, Renata cut in sharply. He tossed us scraps while hoarding clocks worth a fortune. Inventory he promised would be our inheritance, only to lock it away for his precious little grandson. Matteo clutched watch number 851 to his chest, tears streaming down his face. Grandpa loved me, he whispered. He actually loved me. Love doesn't pay the electric bill, kid. Leandro closed the distance. Now hand over the watch and that memory drive you found. Do that, and we can all pretend this conversation never happened. Graciela stepped physically between the man and the boy. You aren't touching this child. And who's going to stop me? Leandro looked her up and down with disgust. The wife of the man who helped us steal those watches in the first place. I'm not anyone's wife anymore, Graciela said, her voice steel, and I will do whatever it takes to keep this family safe. Domingo, who had been paralyzed by the shock, finally found his tongue. Leandro, we were friends. We grew up on the same block, me and Aurelio. How could you do this to him, to your own flesh and blood? Friends. Leandro barked a harsh laugh. You were Aurelio's lapdog, always trailing behind him, always worshipping him, living in his shadow. At least I had the guts to take what I was owed. Guts. Domingo practically spat the word out. You call robbing a dying man guts, abandoning your son, faking your own death. I call it survival, Leandro countered. Something a follower like you wouldn't understand. Through the yelling, Mateo had stayed quiet, his mind working furiously, processing every poisonous word. His heart was in shreds, but through the pain a cold clarity began to form. You visited him, he said suddenly, his voice slicing through the tension. The night my grandfather died, you two went to the hospital. Renata and Leandro shot each other a look sharp, panicked, and way too guilty. I don't know what you're talking about, Renata said, but her confidence was slipping. Rodrigo's lawyer mentioned it. Mateo continued, the pieces of the puzzle snapping together in his mind. Someone else paid grandfather a visit that night, a guest who never signed the logbook. That same night, a phone call woke Rodrigo at 3 a.m. Keep your mouth shut, boy, Leandro snapped. Grandfather had been on the mend. The doctors swore he had a fighting chance, yet he passed away the very hour you people showed up. I told you to be quiet. What did you do to him? Mateo stepped forward, his terror hardening into something far more dangerous. How did you kill him? Esperanza wept every passing second, cementing her darkest nightmares. Renata stared at her son, wearing a look that balanced halfway between annoyance and the ghost of shame. We didn't touch him. We just went for a chat, she insisted. We needed the location of the last batch of watches. At 3 a.m., Renata finally came clean. Rodrigo had already wired the money, but we couldn't ship the goods because your grandfather moved the inventory behind our backs. Then what? Renata shut her eyes, and for a split second her steel facade cracked. He knew. He already knew we sold him out. I don't know how, but he knew. He was waiting for us when we walked in, just watching us with that gaze of his like he was looking right through our skin to the bone. Her voice hitched. We just asked for the hiding spot. We told him if he played ball, we'd vanish. Promised he could die in peace. And, Mateo pressed, what did he say? His voice was barely a whisper. Renata's eyes snapped open, glistening with rare tears. He said, the location of the watches was irrelevant. He told us he'd left everything in order for you, that when you were man enough, the pieces would fall into place. She hesitated, then recalled words that would haunt her forever. What were they? He said, I forgive you, daughter. Not for your sake, but for mine. Resentment is a cage, and I intend to leave this world a free man. But Mateo will uncover the truth, and when that day comes, you will have to carry the weight of your choices. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush them. Mateo wept without shame. Not just from grief, but because even at the end, the old man had been thinking of him, protecting him, loving him without fine print. Then, Esperanza's broken voice cut through the air. What happened after he spoke? We left, Renata answered flatly. We walked out empty-handed, found out he passed the next morning. And you expect us to buy that, Domingo cut in. You expect us to believe your hands are clean? It's the truth, Renata screamed. His heart was failing. The shock of seeing us probably finished him off, but we didn't lay a finger on him, I swear. Your word is worthless. Esperanza spoke with a chill that froze the room. You abandoned your child. You sold out your own father. You faked your death. Why would we trust a single syllable that comes out of your mouth? Renata stood silent, stripped of excuses. Leandro, having watched the drama with growing boredom, stepped up. Enough of this family therapy session. I want that timepiece and the drive inside it. Hand it over. No, Mateo said, his voice steady. This is my grandfather's legacy. He left it to me, and I'm not handing it to the traitors who killed him. I wasn't asking for permission, kid. Leandro lunged at the boy, but before he could close the distance, the unexpected happened. Domingo moved. The old man, bowed by years of guilt over betraying his best friend, stood before Leandro with a resolve that shocked them all. You won't touch this boy. His voice didn't waver. Not while I'm still drawing breath. And what are you going to do, old man? Leandro sneered. Beat me with your walking stick, if I have to. Domingo, no. Mateo tried to pull him back. Listen to me, Mateo. Domingo didn't break eye contact with the thug. I failed your grandfather when it mattered most. I let jealousy blind me, yet Aurelio forgave me. He gave me a second chance I never earned. This is how I repay that debt. How touching. Leandro fished something from his pocket. A small object glinted in the dim light. It was a lighter. You know what's sitting in those crates all around you? He gestured to the warehouse walls. Chemicals, highly flammable solvents Rodrigo stashed here for his illicit side hustles. Panic rippled through the group. If I don't get what I want in 30 seconds, this place becomes an inferno, and you all become dust. Are you insane? Graciela screamed. You'd burn too. I'm already dead on paper. I'm not afraid to do it for real. The silence was deafening. Mateo looked down at the watch in his hands. The masterpiece his grandfather had built with love, the vessel holding the truth that could finally bring justice. Then he made his choice. Fine, he said. You can have the watch. Mateo, don't, Esperanza cried out, but on one condition. Leandro raised an eyebrow. Conditions? You aren't exactly sitting at the head of the table here, kid. My price is simple. Mateo walked slowly toward them. I want my mother to look me in the eye and say she never loved me. I want to hear her say the words. I'll give you everything later. Renata's face lost all color. Mateo, I'm only asking for one thing here, the truth. Just this once, don't lie to me. The silence stretched out heavy and suffocating. Every pair of eyes in the room drilled into Renata, the woman who walked away from it all, the woman who picked a payout over her own flesh and blood. Now she had to face her son's stare, begging for the one thing her wealth couldn't purchase, honesty. Renata took slow, deliberate steps toward Mateo. She stopped right in front of him, close enough to count the tears tracking down his face. Say it, Mateo. The boy didn't back down. If you never loved me, just admit it. Give me that at least. Renata opened her mouth, but her voice died in her throat. Instead, the room witnessed something completely unexpected. She broke down. This wasn't a performance. These weren't crocodile tears meant to manipulate. This was raw, gut-wrenching grief pouring out from the deepest part of her soul. I can't, she whispered. I can't say it because it's a lie. What? I loved you, Mateo. I loved you the second I held you. You were so tiny, just perfect. And I was terrified. Terrified of what? Of turning into my father. Of chasing other things and forgetting you even though I loved you. I was scared I'd do exactly what he did to me. Tears streamed down her face uncontrollably. So I did something unforgivable. I tricked myself into believing I didn't care. I told myself you were better off without me and I ran. Just like a coward. She sank to her knees, looking him straight in the eye. I don't deserve forgiveness. I don't even deserve to look at you. But you need to know not a single day went by where you weren't on my mind. Every night I lay awake wondering who you were growing up to be. She gently cupped his face. And now I look at you, so brave, so strong. You're just like your grandfather. Leaving you with him was the only right thing I ever did. He gave you what I was too broken to give. Unconditional love. Mateo was shaking. Why, he sobbed, why didn't you come back? Why didn't you look for me? Because the shame just got heavier every day. How do you tell a child his mother walked out because she was scared? How do you apologize for the unforgivable? That's enough. Leandro snapped, his patience completely gone. I didn't come here for a soap opera. Renata, get up. We got what we came for. But Renata stayed put. No. Excuse me. I said no. She stood up and wheeled around to face Leandro. It's over. I'm done running. I'm done hurting my family. Have you lost your mind? Leandro grabbed her arm hard. After everything, you're going to blow this now. I blew it years ago the moment I listened to you. When I let you convince me that cash mattered more than my own son. She yanked her arm free. Mateo, take the watches, take the drive, do what your grandfather wanted. Expose the truth. Mateo was speechless. And later, if you ever find the strength, forgive me. Not for my sake, but for yours. Your grandfather was right. Hate is a prison. Leandro raised the lighter. If I can't have the watches, nobody gets them. He flicked the flame into life. Just then, wails of sirens cut through the air outside. Red and blue strobes flooded the warehouse. The police were here. The sirens shattered the night's silence, sounding like hope. Detective Ignacio Paredes stormed in first, a squad of officers right behind him. He scanned the scene in a heartbeat. The trapped group. Leandro, clutching the lighter, the crates of hazardous materials nearby. Police, nobody move. Leandro weighed his odds in a split second. He could torch the place and end it all, or he could run. His survival instinct, the thing that kept him alive in the underworld for years, made the choice for him. He dropped the lighter and bolted for the side exit. He didn't make it far. 2 officers tackled him before he even got close to the door. They pinned him to the concrete and cuffed him, ignoring the threats he was screaming. This isn't over, he roared as they hauled him away. Renata, tell them to let me go, Renata. She didn't answer. She stood, frozen eyes filled with tears and years of regret fixed on her son. Detective Paredes walked over to them. "Everyone all right? We're okay." Graciela answered, her voice shaky. "How did you find us?" Paredes jerked a thumb toward the entrance. A familiar silhouette stepped through the flashing patrol lights. It was Valentin Carrera, the jewelry store manager. Mateo recognized him instantly. "You." Valentin walked toward them looking ashamed but determined. "After what went down at the shop, I couldn't sleep. The way we treated you, the way I treated you, it ate away at me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw your face. I saw the dignity you held while we mocked you, and I felt sick with myself." He paused, his voice cracking. "The moment Mrs. Montemayor showed up asking for the files, my gut told me something huge was about to break. I kept my distance and tailed her. But the second I saw them slip into that warehouse, followed by those two thugs looking for trouble, I knew I had to step in. I didn't hesitate to dial the police." He locked eyes with Mateo, fighting back the moisture gathering in them. "I couldn't let them hurt you, kid. Not after the hell you've already been through. I owed you a debt, and this was the only way I could start to square the ledger." Mateo stood there, struck dumb. This was the same man who had sneered at his poverty, mocking his tattered shoes and stained clothes, yet here he was playing the savior. "Thank you," was all he could manage to choke out. "Truly." Valentin nodded, a single tear finally breaking free and tracking down his face. "It was the very least I could do. Your grandfather, he was right about everything. A man's worth isn't found in his wallet or his wardrobe, it's in his chest. And you, Mateo, you've got the bravest heart I've ever seen." Detective Paredes moved in on Renata, who stood perfectly still, offering neither flight nor fight. "Renata Contreras, you are under arrest for conspiracy fraud and being an accessory to theft. You have the right to remain silent." As the Miranda warning droned on, Renata never broke eye contact with her son. Just before they hauled her off, she called out to Mateo. "It was the truth. Every single word of it. I love you. I always have from the very first second I held you." Tears streamed down the boy's face. "I know, Mom. I know." It had been years since that word had crossed his lips. The word was barely a whisper, yet it struck Renata's chest with the force of a thunderclap, bringing a sudden storm of hope. A watery smile broke through Renata's tears. It was a melancholic smile, yet filled with relief, the look of someone finally setting down a crushing load they'd carried in silence for years. "Find your happiness, my boy. Be everything I failed to be. Live the life I threw away. And don't you ever forget that you are worthy of love." She surrendered without a fight, finally owning up to the cost of her choices. Esperanza moved to her grandson and pulled him into a crushing embrace. They wept together, but the sorrow was gone. These were tears of release, of closure, and the clean slate of a new beginning. "We did it, little one," the old woman whispered. "Your grandfather, he would be so incredibly proud of you right now." The following weeks were absolute chaos. That flash drive Aurelio had stashed inside watch number 851 held everything he promised, and then some. It was full of audio recordings. Rodrigo, Renata, and Leandro, all caught on tape plotting the heist alongside documents verifying money laundering schemes and photos tying Rodrigo to crimes the police hadn't even sniffed out yet. The story exploded nationwide. The papers dubbed it the Watch Scandal. TV stations ran round-the-clock specials, but the real hook was the story of the brave kid who stood up to the elites. He became a beacon of hope for thousands. Rodrigo Montemayor was slapped with a massive sentence on multiple counts. His empire of lies crumbled like a house of cards, exposing decades of rot and corruption. Standing in that courtroom as the gavel fell, the man who once sneered, "This watch isn't for you," could not even look anyone in the eye. Leandro Solis faced similar charges tacked on with fraud for faking his own death. All that arrogance vanished the moment the reality of spending years behind bars sank in. The man who had labeled his own son a mistake was finally facing the consequences of his actual errors. Renata got a reduced sentence for cooperating with the feds and testifying against her co-conspirators. The judge acknowledged her genuine remorse, though he made it crystal clear that her actions still carried weight. Yet he granted her something she hadn't anticipated: a shot at redemption. But the story didn't end with a gavel bang. Graciela Montemayor took full control of the Imperial Diamond Jewelry Store. Her first move was to burn the old model down and build something fresh, a space for local artisans to showcase their work without getting ripped off. A place that celebrated craft instead of using it to launder dirty money. She renamed it the Aurelio Contreras Gallery. On opening day, Mateo stood right next to his grandmother to cut the ribbon. Hundreds of people turned out to witness the moment. At the entrance, a golden plaque caught the sunlight. In honor of Aurelio Contreras, master watchmaker. His art lives in every piece he created. His love lives in every heart he touched. His legacy reminds us that true wealth isn't measured in gold, but in the mark we leave on the people we love. The 9 watches sold to private collectors were slowly recovered. Once the buyers heard the full story, some of them actually returned the pieces, voluntarily moved by Aurelio's sacrifice and his grandson's courage. Some legal battles dragged on entangled in red tape, but eventually every single item found its way home. 12 timepieces' absolute masterworks were finally under one roof again. Graciela curated a dedicated show at the gallery to mark the reunion. For the first time, the public got to see Aurelio's life work with little placards next to each glass case detailing the history, the meaning, and the very soul poured into the metal. You could read about the sheer devotion the old craftsman hammered into every gear and spring. Thousands lined up just to catch a glimpse. High society collectors flew in, struggling artists came for the muse, and regular families showed up just because they had seen the drama unfold on the evening news. They all wanted to touch the legacy of a man who managed to manufacture pure beauty even when his own life was falling apart. Yet, the crown jewel, watch 847, the one Aurelio built specifically for his grandson, stayed out of sight. That one stayed exactly where it belonged, resting against Mateo's chest, ticking in rhythm with his own pulse. It was his private link to the old man, and frankly no museum display case could honor it half as well as the boy Aurelio had cherished above all else. One spring afternoon, with the city in bloom and the scent of fresh starts in the air, Mateo went to see his mother at the court-mandated rehab facility. They took seats across from each other in a visitor's lounge washed in sunlight. The walls were done up in calming pastels, and someone had placed fresh-cut flowers by the windowsill. Renata looked changed, quieter, more settled in her own skin. That haunted look she always carried seemed to have finally lifted. "I appreciate you coming," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Wasn't sure you would show up. There is something you need to know." Mateo didn't hesitate. "What is it?" He reached into his pocket. He pulled out a battered old snapshot worn soft from years of handling. It showed a young woman cradling a newborn looking down at him like he was the only thing in the universe. It froze a moment of absolute innocence, before the fear set in, before the bad choices burned everything down. "I found this in Grandpa's stuff," he explained. He kept it in a box with his most valuable tools, held onto it all this time. Renata's hand shook as she took the photo. She couldn't stop the tears. They dripped onto the glossy paper like rain on a memory. "I remember this," she whispered. "Happiest day I ever had. Before the panic took over, before I let my own insecurities turn me into a stranger." "Grandpa never gave up on you," Mateo said. In the letter he hid inside the watch, he wrote something I haven't mentioned yet. What did it say? He wrote, "Renata has made terrible mistakes, but she is still my daughter. And somewhere deep down, she is still that little girl who used to run to me when she was scared. The one who begged for bedtime stories and watched me work on the gears with wide, admiring eyes. If she ever finds her way back, I hope Mateo has the wisdom to let her in. Not because she's earned it, but because forgiveness is the greatest gift we can give ourselves." Renata broke down sobbing openly, making no effort to hide the pain or the gratitude. "Your grandfather, he was incredible. I didn't deserve his love, but he gave it anyway." "I know," Mateo smiled, "and I'm proud to be his grandson. I try to be a little more like him every day." He paused, weighing what to say next. "I'm learning how to forgive too. It's not easy. What you did, it still hurts. Some nights I wake up remembering how I grew up thinking you were dead and the pain comes rushing back. But Grandpa was right. Holding a grudge is like living in a cage and I want to be free." Renata reached her hand across the table, a small, tentative gesture heavy with hope but terrified of rejection. Mateo stared at her hand for a long time. Memories flashed through his mind, nights crying for a mother he thought was gone. Birthdays with that hollow feeling in his chest, the torment of unanswered questions. But then his grandfather's words echoed in his head. "Forgiveness isn't for the one receiving it. It's for the one giving it." Slowly he laid his hand over hers. It wasn't a clean slate. There was still a long road ahead, plenty of healing to do and tough talks to get through, but it was a start. And sometimes a start is all you need to rewrite the ending. Summer rolled in, bringing brighter days and fresh promises. Esperanza had blossomed in a way nobody saw coming. The woman who buried her husband, suffered her daughter's betrayal, and stared down real danger was now radiating a contagious sort of peace. Her laugh was back. You could see the life sparking in her eyes again. "I owe this to you," she told Matteo one night over dinner in the kitchen, the same room that had seen so many tears fall. "You were the reason I kept pushing when I was ready to throw in the towel. You showed me that Aurelio isn't really gone. He lives on through you, through the art he left behind, and in everyone moved by our story." By this point, Domingo Herrera wasn't just a visitor, he was family. He was a constant presence, fixing up the house for Esperanza, and handling the heavy repairs, basically filling the void Aurelio left behind. But the real gift was the stories he shared with Matteo, tales about his grandfather's wild youth, his dreams, and the very first watches he ever built that nobody else knew about. "Your grandpa would be beaming if he could see you now," he told him one afternoon while they were weeding the garden. "You pulled off his biggest dream. You brought this broken family back together, dug up the truth, and you did it with your head held high. You never stooped to the level of the people who hurt you." Matteo wiped the sweat from his brow. "I didn't do it alone. I had a lot of help," but Domingo shook his head. "No, you led the charge. You walked into that jewelry store as a nobody they looked down on and walked out having changed every single life you touched. That's not just impressive, Matteo, that is a straight-up miracle." Graciela was a regular fixture too, showing up every week with homemade cakes and the latest gossip from the gallery. In the Contreras home, she had finally found the warmth and connection her cold marriage to Rodrigo never offered. Once the news broke, her daughter flew back from overseas, determined to stand by her mother's side. Together, they were rising from the ashes, building a life that was actually worth living. Then there were Valentin and Marlene. The same employees who used to sneer at Matteo were now key players at the Aurelio Contreras gallery. They had transformed into the fiercest guardians of the master's legacy, humbled by a lesson that stuck. You can't judge a man's worth by the cut of his suit or the zeros in his bank account. It is about character guts and how much love you can give. On the one-year anniversary of Aurelio's passing, the whole clan gathered at the cemetery. Sunlight dappled through the branches of an ancient tree, casting a gentle glow over the headstone. Birds chirped in the distance, almost as if nature decided to pay its own respects to the master watchmaker. Matteo stepped forward and laid a bouquet of fresh daisies on the grave, Aurelio's favorites. Beside him stood Esperanza, wearing a dress her husband had always adored. Domingo stood like a sentinel, fighting back tears, while Graciela clutched her daughter's hand. In the back, Valentin and Marlene bowed their heads in silent respect. The real shocker was Renata. She had been granted special leave to attend, flanked by 2 guards, but the shame was gone from her eyes. Instead, she looked thankful, just grateful to be part of the moment, thankful for a second shot at redemption. The boy knelt on the grass, pulling watch number 847 from under his shirt. He held it up, watching the sunlight catch the intricate details of the metal. "Grandpa." He started, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "I did it. I tracked down every single watch, uncovered the truth, brought us all back together, and I learned the big lesson." He paused, letting the tears track freely down his face. "You taught me that time isn't about seconds or minutes. It is measured in moments. In hugs that stay with you forever, in words of love that echo long after the speaker is gone, in brave acts that push others forward, and in forgiving people even when it is easier to hate." He glanced back at his grandmother, at his mother, and everyone else standing there. "You left me surrounded by people who actually care about me. Your legacy is way bigger than art or watches. You gave me the absolute certainty that no matter how pitch black the road gets, there is always a light waiting at the end. You just have to be brave enough to keep walking until you find it." He stood up and pressed the watch against his chest, feeling its rhythm sync with his own heartbeat. "I am going to honor you every single day, Grandpa. I will create beautiful things just like you. I will love without strings attached. I will forgive even when it stings. And one day, when I have a family of my own, I will tell them about the extraordinary man my grandfather was. The master watchmaker who taught me that a person's value isn't in what they own, but in what they give. It isn't about hoarding, it is about sharing." A gentle breeze swept through, rustling the leaves and brushing against their faces. And right then, everyone could have sworn they heard it, the soft ticking of a clock. It wasn't coming from Matteo's watch, it was coming from everywhere and nowhere all at once. It was like the air itself was pulsing with the same rhythm Aurelio had crafted 1,000 times in his workshop, as if the master watchmaker, wherever he was letting them know he was listening. That he was right there with them, proud, and that his love would keep beating in every heart he had ever touched. Matteo smiled at the sky, the tears on his cheeks glittering like diamonds. "Thank you, Grandpa, for everything. for seeing the potential in me and for teaching me that real love doesn't end just because a life does. Esperanza squeezed her grandson's hand tight. Watching from the side, Renata pressed a palm against her chest, feeling the weight of the moment. Domingo bowed his head, a quiet, solemn gesture of reverence. Graciela closed her eyes, murmuring a silent prayer. As the sun dipped below the skyline, bleeding gold and violet into the dusk, the cracks in this fractured family finally began to mend. It wasn't that the grief had vanished. It was that they had learned to forge that pain into something beautiful, something with purpose, something that lasts. That was the final lesson Aurelio Contreras left behind, etched into the way he lived just as deeply as it was in his art. The years roll on, but the moments that actually define us stay branded on our souls forever. Wounds close up, leaving scars to prove we survived the fight. But love, the real kind, is timeless, steady as the ticking of a clock that refuses to stop. Just like the spirit of a master watchmaker living on in every gear and spring he ever assembled. Just like the heart of a boy who proved that a person's worth isn't measured by the cash in their pocket, but by the guts to chase the truth and the strength to forgive. This is the story of Mateo Contreras, the ragged kid who walked into a luxury jewelry store and shifted the fate of everyone in the room. The grandson who honored his grandfather from beyond the grave. The son who found the grace to forgive the unforgivable. The true heir to a legacy that time itself can never erase.